What's up, and welcome to another edition of the Cover 2 Recap. I'm BruinSportsport.com publisher Edward Lewis. As always, this is Ryan Karchi, the UCLA beat writer for the OC Register. We're here today at Spalding Field, where UCLA just wrapped up its 13th day of spring practice. Only 2 more to go. Again, today was another light one. No pads, no real hitting. At least there was a little more 11-on-11, a little more one-on-ones. But diving into kind of the note of the day was Jeff Ulbrich's press conference. He told us after practice today that, you know what, this defense doesn't really have a base defense anymore. It's not necessarily a 3-4 anymore. It's not necessarily a 4-2-5 anymore, or 3-3-5, whatever it is. Tell me your takeaways from Jeff's kind of press conference about his defense.
It's definitely, from what we've seen of this defense so far, I think it's kind of self-explanatory by now that they're going to play a lot more nickel. And that's you kind of have to in the Pac-12. I mean, guys are going more, 4 wide, even 5 wide, and with some teams, say like Washington State. So you're kind of forced to put out those 5 defensive backs. And the good news for them in those circumstances is it kind of plays into their strengths. Thinking, a lot of those guys, Randall Goforth, Anthony Jefferson, they're guys who can play either safety or corner, and they have a physicality to them. They're not necessarily corners who can't stop the run. Ish Adams told us today that he prefers playing at nickel and likes being closer to the ball, so he can play a part in that. So I think we're definitely going to see a little bit more nickel. Like Ulbrich said, it's going to just be a week-by-week thing. I mean, we're going to... he talked about the depth at outside linebacker. It's pretty thin right now, so that's kind of contributed to them playing a little bit more nickel, and they'll definitely have more depth in the fall. But at this point, I think you can definitely count on that being more of their base, with maybe kind of a 3-3-5 over a 4-2-5 as kind of their general, run stopping, first down, second down scheme.
I think that's one of the coolest things about Ulbrich is he doesn't pigeonhole himself into one defense like Lou Spanos had. It was a 3-4, and okay, if we need the nickel, we'll run it. Jeff said, look, man, if we have a defense that's going to get 11 guys on the field that I like, we're going to play that defense. Today we even saw that. They normally run this 4-2-5 with the nickel with Kenny Orgioki with his hand in the dirt. Well, today they put it as a 3-3-5 and had Orgioki kind of backed off the line of scrimmage. I mean, if that's what your best defense is, that's the way he's going to play it.
And especially last year, and I mean, it seemed like with almost every second half, they switched into more nickel in the second half. So I think if you're going to make that adjustment every single time anyway, you might as well just play it more from the jump.
The other note of the day, or the other press conference of the day, was Priest Willis. We talked to him quite a bit at length about kind of his struggles as a freshman, kind of not living up to the hype, playing corner versus safety, kind of a confidence thing. Tell me your takeaways from that press conference.
Well, I thought he was pretty open about his, losing confidence. Last year it was pretty evident to anyone who was watching him, either in practice or in the little time he did get in games, that he just didn't have it. I mean, he wasn't confident in his ability. He said he didn't really know corner. He was a little bit behind on that. And he's kind of had that time to kind of get used to the position a little bit more. He talked a little bit about, potentially moving to safety and how he'd be open to it, which is interesting just because of how much Jim Mora was kind of against that idea last fall. But I think he started to look a little bit better in this past week. He said he's kind of learned the finer points of the defense a little bit more, and he's getting a little bit more comfortable as a corner. I still think he's better in kind of the short range as a corner than he is, in guarding the deep ball or going up against especially speedy wide receivers who can get past him. But at this point, I think he's definitely making some strides, and they've definitely given him more chances. He's been in there quite a bit with the first and second teams in these last few weeks.
His big deal was kind of that corner versus safety thing, and where does he fit and all this. I remember in the recruiting process, he was a bulked up, barrel-chested 215 safety for a while, and there became kind of this point in his recruiting process where he said, look, I want to play corner, and he lost all that weight, and everybody was kind of like, well, why are you losing the weight? And then he came here and played corner. The bottom line is he just has to get better at corner. I mean, he's been improving every single day out here, but it's still not good enough to beat out guys like Ish or Tahan or Randall or Anthony or Fabian, and he's just got to get better at it. And I think it'll be interesting to see whether that's a confidence issue or whether it's his skill set in general.
I think at this point we can probably slot him in as being one of those, as being on the 2 deep, but not necessarily being a guy that you're going to see play that much this year, just given how much more depth they have now than maybe they did at the beginning of last year.
Getting in top performers, give me 1 or 2 guys that stood out to you today at today's practice.
You mentioned it a little bit, but I was really impressed with Kenny Orgioki, and he's kind of, at the beginning of spring, I know Jim Mora said that was a position he was definitely going to watch, that they weren't going to necessarily hand the position over to Orgioki. Well, I think he's very clearly taken that position. I don't think there's a position battle there at all now. He's kind of proven, and we always knew he had the athleticism, but he didn't necessarily have the mental understanding of the position to use that athleticism correctly. I think at this point, now that they're using him more in the pass rush, and we even watched him today just guarding running backs in one-on-ones, he looks like he's really using that athleticism to his advantage. And like I said, I've been very impressed with him most of the spring, and I think there's, very little chance, even with the few guys that are behind him, that any of those guys will surpass him in the fall.
My two guys, starting with Ashanti Woolard, is a guy we've kind of harped on a lot here on the Cover 2 recap, but today I thought he had a really, really nice bounce-back day. In one-on-ones, he threw the best ball of any quarterback out here, and that includes Brett Hundley. The ball was really popping off his hand. It was good to see after getting beaten down really even verbally by Jim Mora the other day that he can bounce back. In 11-on-11s, he looked comfortable there too, and kind of his ability to scramble and kind of defeat the pressure stood out more to me today than it did Jerry Neuheisel kind of in the past. The other standout today was Kenny Walker. We've mentioned him a lot on this Cover 2 recap as well, but he kind of has, when he's on, he looks just kind of like a blur. Just kind of you just don't really see him until he catches the ball, and then you don't see him after that either. He had a stretch there, probably about 10 minutes, where he had 5 or 6 catches and just looked great out here.
He's definitely gotten better in his route running. I think that's, that and his hands are definitely the two areas that he's going to have to improve on even more going into the season.
That'll wrap up our coverage from Spring Ball Day 13. As always, you can follow Ryan's coverage of UCLA on Twitter at Ryan_Karchi and at OCRegister.com. You can follow me on Twitter at EdwardLewisBSR and at BruinsSportsport.com. Until the next time, thanks for tuning in to the Cover 2 Recap.